Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is lay. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear lay used is to mean to put something down, especially putting that thing down gently or carefully. For this particular definition, you might think of someone who's holding a baby in their arms and then they lay the baby down in the baby's crib, right? So you're going to be very gentle and careful as you put the baby down into a crib. A second way you might hear the verb lay used is to mean to produce an egg from inside the body. So, for this particular definition, we are talking about animals like birds, insects, reptiles, amphibians. This is how they reproduce. They're young. You might think of a chicken who lays eggs, right? Produces eggs. A third way you might hear the verb lay used is to mean to set in position for use. So there are many professionals who lay carpet or lay tile in people's homes and offices. So they're setting those things in position to be used as people live and work. You should know that lay is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, all I'm going to do is add ing to form laying. Now, I might have some former students watching who might say, hey, Katie, you always said when we have a consonant, vowel, consonant, then we're going to double that consonant. But here, the A and the Y together are functioning like one single vowel sound here. So the Y is not functioning as a consonant. So that's why we're not doubling it here. You should know that the past tense and participle forms of this verb have a completely different spelling, but they're both L-A-I-D or laid. Okay. Now, lay is a really popular phrasal verb. So we're going to focus today on some additional meanings, and I'll try and point out verb tenses as we walk through our examples. So, one phrasal verb you might read is lay before. This means to present information that's going to be considered or used. An example of this could be the committee will lay before the House of Representatives its report on the January 6th attack on the Capitol. So, there is a committee of representatives right now investigating, collecting information about what led to and what occurred on January 6th at the US Capitol. And eventually, the committee is going to present that to the entire House of Representatives. Another phrasal verb, before I do that, I should say will lay before is an example of simple future. The next one we'll look at is lay down. This can have three different meanings, and we're going to look at each. The first is to clearly state a rule. An example of this particular meaning in a sentence would be the company has laid down new policies for unvaccinated employees. So they have clearly stated new rules for maybe if those employees are allowed to work at their particular site, or if they can, then they must wear a mask, etc. But something has been clearly stated. And has laid down is an example of the present perfect. The next meaning for lay down is to stop using something. You might hear this in the imperative, the command. Lay down your tools and come help unload the truck, right? So stop using whatever tools you're using and come do this other action. A third way you might hear lay down used is to give up or surrender a weapon. An example of this could be the police yelled, lay down your guns to the bank robbers. Okay, so here, lay down your guns, this is a command, it's another imperative. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is lay into. This means to criticize someone very harshly. So you might think about someone raising their voice, yelling, and being very negative towards another. An example of that in a sentence might be, the teacher laid into students who were tardy for her class. Tardy means not on time. Here, laid into is simple past tense. So we might imagine, and maybe you've seen this or experienced it yourself, where many people show up late and the teacher gets kind of angry and criticizes them and their behavior. Let's continue looking at some more phrasal verbs with lay. The next one we're going to look at is lay off. This can have several different meanings. We're going to focus on 3 of them today. And the first meaning is to stop doing something. An example of this could be, he should lay off drinking. And here, many times as people refer to drinking, they mean drinking alcohol. So here, right, maybe this is someone who's doing it too much. It's affecting relationships or work or other things, so probably needs to stop. Should lay off is a modal for advice. Okay? A second way you might hear the phrasal verb lay off used is to mean to stop employing someone. And this is very different than firing, right? With fire, generally an employee has done something bad, or maybe many things that are bad or wrong. And so their behavior is causing the stoppage in work. Here, with a layoff, many times there just might not be enough work to continue to employ people, or maybe the company no longer has money to pay their employees. So, an example of this meaning in a sentence might be, millions of workers in the tourism industry were laid off during the pandemic. This is unfortunately a very true statement. This is an example of the passive voice in the past tense, so were laid off. Our third way to use layoff might be to mean to stop bothering, teasing, or pestering someone. So with this particular meaning, you're generally going to see an imperative used with it, with a command. So an example of this, imagine a parent saying, lay off your brother, right? Stop bothering him, stop teasing, stop pestering. This might have been something I heard as a child, to stop bothering or being mean to my younger brother. The next phrasal verb you'll hear is lay out. This means to arrange something in a particular way. An example of this could be, will you lay the magazines out throughout the waiting room? So set some on one table, set some on another. That is what's being described in that question. And that's a simple future where we can see will there. You might also interpret this as making a request of someone else. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is lay over. This means to make a stop in the middle of a journey. This is really common with air travel. Okay, so an example of this might be, this flight lays over in Chicago. So this is an example of this simple present, right? We're talking about sort of the schedule, the habit or routine of this particular flight. So there's going to be a stop in Chicago before they go to their final destination. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is lay up. This means to cause someone to stay at home because of injury or illness. An example of this meaning in a sentence might be, she was laid up for 2 weeks after surgery. So this is another example of a passive voice sentence in the simple past tense. Okay, so this person had to stay at home for about 2 weeks after their surgery in order to recover. Maybe she wasn't well enough to drive or to go to work, etc. Now, let's spend just a little time looking at some words and phrases that are related to our verb lay. And the first word we're going to look at is going to sound really familiar. It is a compound word. So we had the phrasal verb lay over, but now we're going to bring those two words together to form a noun that means a period of rest or waiting before a further stage in a journey. So you might hear the noun form in a sentence like this. We had a 4-hour layover on our trip to Europe. So we flew one place to another, we waited 4 hours, and then we continued on our trip to Europe. A second noun that you might hear is also compound. So we saw lay up before, but the noun form of this is used most commonly in basketball, and it's to refer to a one-handed shot that's made very close to the basket, right? So generally it's thought to sort of be an easier way to score, right? You're much closer to the basket than being further away. So you might hear a coach yell something like, you can't let the team get easy layups, right? You've got to defend or protect our basket. The next phrase we're going to look at is lay of the land. This phrase is used to refer to a particular state, arrangement, or condition of something. You might hear it used in this way. When you arrive in your new city, make sure you take some time to get the lay of the land, right? Figure out where things are in your neighborhood, maybe meet some people, figure out the bus route or other forms of public transportation, right? So understand sort of the condition of your new city. Another phrase you might hear is to lay a finger on. Okay, this generally means to touch someone or something, and it could be a little odd in that it might refer to like barely touching or making contact. Okay, so with that particular meaning, maybe think of bringing a small child to you in a store where they have many breakable items, maybe pieces of art, vases, other glass ornament type things, right? You might say to your child before going into that store, don't lay a finger on anything, right? I don't want you to touch anything because if you break it, I'm going to have to buy it, okay? But lay a finger on can also mean touching someone to the point where you're hurting them or you're injuring them. So, an example of that could be, no one had better lay a finger on my children, right? I don't want them hurt at all. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.